When the Eurobond came to me, some young guy from Nyeri, I will not name him because he's still a government employee, he then who came to me and told me something funny is happening. The government has gone for the Eurobond, but what it has done, it has raised domestic borrowing by the same amount that is borrowing from the Eurobond. And so the projects it wants to do will be funded from its income from the likes of KenGen, Safaricom, and whatever. But over and above that, it's going to borrow the extra to fill up the difference. But the Eurobond money is not coming here. It's going to be spent, to be banked offshore. And only the debt will come into the consolidated fund. You need to do something. So that's how we get here. And now when you look at it, eventually the Eurobonds came to 7 billion Kenya, right now there are about 7 billion US dollars that we have borrowed. To make matters worse, when Ruto comes in February 2024, he goes to borrow further Eurobond of about 140 billion, ostensibly to pay the Eurobond which had matured, and that money is again kept offshore. And yet, when you look at our constitution in Article 214, it clearly states that the fund is a current expenditure paid directly from the consolidated fund. You can't borrow to pay debt, but they have gone ahead, they borrowed that money. When you look at the consolidated fund, you really see evidence of the Eurobond having been paid from the consolidated fund. But you can also see that the government went out of its way and borrowed money ostensibly to retire that debt. And so, with this kind of arrangement, we felt, no, we must go to court and see if we can bring some accountability to the country, to the question of debt. And if we can give the courts an opportunity to express themselves on this issue. And because some of these things are largely driven like by the IMF, which lends under the table, doesn't follow the law, and the World Bank, but particularly the IMF, because we had evidence of their rollovers and what they had done. They're even giving money for Kenya government to lend when the Kenya government is not a lending agency and stuff like that. So we put them in. And so yesterday they raised an objection that they're immune from accountability. But some of us, when we read the Constitution of Kenya, well, that treaty of 1964, which the Jomo Kenyatta government signed, says they're immune from all manner of legal proceedings in Kenya, except where they choose to waive their own immunity. Not even the government that can waive their immunity. It is them to choose to waive their immunity. So we want the court to come in and try to see whether that contract that they signed, that agreement, supersedes the Constitution of Kenya, which says that any law that was in force before the new constitution continues in force, but with alterations and adaptations that make it conform with the current constitution. And what is it conforming with the current constitution? You have got the question that the people are sovereign, and they can exercise their power directly, or they can exercise their power through the institutions. Like I was listening to the young man who was speaking before me, is I think pleading that if the courts fail that delegated mandate, Kenyans should be able to exercise direct democracy and see what they do about this question of debt. Or maybe go and say, okay, we are not going to pay this debt, but we are going to say that Mr. Uhuru and your regime, whatever you borrowed, can you pay up that money, or we auction you and pay that money? Mr. William Ruto and your regime, you borrowed this funny money, can you pay it back so that we can get rid of this? And also we got the pillars who lend the money and say, you are lending this money knowing very well Kenya had a law that forbade what you are doing, but we don't want maybe to fight so much. Can you do this? This money is kept in your capitals. Can we take that money you pay yourselves to redeem your debts and free us from debt so that we can go back and manage our budgets? So basically that's what we are trying to achieve in the courts, and we hope that we'll be able to make our case, and we have got complete faith in the courts that the courts will be able to, one way or the other, to make a ruling, out of which then we can say what's the next course of action. If the courts agree with us, then we are going to say, okay, then can they say former officials be forced to pay? There have been many people who have come in, like the former auditor, control of budgets, the auditor generals and whatever have said they cannot be sued personally, they should be removed. But the court has said that no, just go ahead and answer the pleadings. When we make the also in your response, tell us why we cannot you cannot be sued by Omtatah and company. The court did not agree that they argued that case as a preliminary objection, which to me was a good development. The central bank supported the case when it said when the AG had applied for dismissal. The central bank sort of was indirectly supported us by saying, no, the case is weighty. It should not even be heard by one judge. It should be heard by more than, it should be heard by a bench of 3 or 5 judges. Now we are before a bench of 3 judges. And so, to me, it's a question of focusing on the case, giving it our best arguments, doing a lot of research, seeing how you overcome the obstacles. Even the IMF has been told, okay, you want to be removed from this case, just like the other fellows, public officials who want to be removed. You can go ahead and respond to the petition and also tell us why you want to be removed. So, this case is going to clarify a lot of issues. Look at like what we are dealing with right now. You have got this thing called, what's the name of this? Nyota Fund. We are told that the World Bank just gave Mr. William Ruto some 20 billion shillings to distribute with no mechanisms of accountability, no involvement of parliament, no public participation, nothing. Everything is done in contempt, not even violation of the law. Contemptuous violation of the law. How does Omtatah, how does Onyango, how does Mushere, how does Misati, how does Ambrose, how does anybody pay this man, this money? How does Yoko pay this money? Yoko and his children, whom you are yet to be born. How do they pay this debt that have not even been consulted about, their parents are not consulted about, their parliament was not consulted about? Then the money was given to one man who is dishing it out in a campaign mode. You even don't know how, maybe it's just taken out of the 20 billion. He's taken 1 billion to play around with. Because if you take a billion and divide by 20,000 shillings, it's millions of people, a lot of people. How are we going to see? So maybe I've taken just 1 or 2 billion to play around with, running around the countryside, confusing people. And then he's keeping the 18 billion to himself. And then saying that Yoko and his officers have to pay that debt. How? How does that happen? So these are the questions we are bringing up and saying, no, that this country, we need to take Chapter 12 seriously. And even if you look at the question of debt, how is this debt acquired? When you look at the structure of the Constitution, you go to Article 109, Clause 1, it says that Parliament exercises its legislative power through bills approved by Parliament and signed into law by the President. Now, there's a habit that has come up in this country whereby we have got something called the budget policy statement. A statement, not a bill, is brought to Parliament, that for Parliament to lay the boundaries, to set the boundaries within which demarcate the boundaries within which the borrowing, or which the budget figures should be set. So that thing then becomes, given the color of the law, it doesn't come like a bill. It doesn't go through the rigors of a bill. It's just something that goes for people just to waste their time. We earn a bit of allowances discussing it. And then it's passed by, they say Parliament has passed it. Using what mechanism, I don't know. The President does not sign it into law, but it becomes law when you go and read Section 49 of the Public Finance Management Act, which says that the minister can use the budget policy statement to borrow. Now, the Constitution says all borrowing must be in the budget. The Constitution tells you the budget must have estimates of revenue and estimates of expenditure. And those estimates should be in the budget. And you know what the budget, and the budget is a law. So the budget is a appropriation act. That's the only thing on the budget that comes as a bill, and Parliament enacts it, passes it, and the president signs it into law. The budget policy statement is not the one. But you'll find that the estimates of revenue, where the loans and whatever and those kind of things are never included in the budget. And so the borrowing is done in violation of the Constitution. I've told you earlier on that Article 221 Clause 5 requires that these estimates be subjected to public participation so that the Kenyan people can have a direct say over and above what their representatives say. It never happens.